Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and this is where we uncover powerful stories of resilience, transition, and growth from those who've worn the uniform. Whether you're currently serving, preparing for civilian life, or seeking inspiration to tackle life's challenges head on, you're in the right place. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to someone who has transformed his own financial struggles into a mission of impact. Meet Brandon Levenger, known throughout the military community as the Enlisted Money Guy. That's trademarked, by the way. With over 19 years of distinguished Army service, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, Brandon has dedicated himself to a crucial mission, empowering enlisted service members to build financial freedom and security. What makes Brandon's story so compelling is its raw authenticity. From the classic young soldier mistakes, the flashy trucks, excessive spending on beer and energy drinks, and the sobering reality of using credit cards for rent, he's lived the financial challenges that many service members face. But where it gets interesting, through grit, discipline, and intentional choices, Brandon and his wife have completely transformed their financial story, becoming debt-free and building genuine wealth. Brandon's expertise goes far beyond personal experience. As a chartered financial consultant, he has become a respected voice in the military financial education, contributing to platforms like MilMoneyCon and recently earning the American College of Financial Services Next Gen Financial Professional Award for 2024. As he approaches retirement after nearly 2 decades of service, he's not just talking the talk. He's actively demonstrating how to build a successful transition strategy. But this conversation isn't just about money management. It's about resilience and redemption, from losing promotable status in Afghanistan to thriving as a recruiter and ultimately building what he calls his retirement off-ramp. Today, we're going to explore how these pivotal moments shaped his journey, how he leveraged military experience into a thriving financial education platform, and why he believes in starting transition planning from day one. Whether you're struggling with finances, preparing for a major life transition, or simply seeking inspiration to level up, today's episode is packed with actionable insights. Brandon's going to share practical financial strategies, transition planning wisdom, and why exploring side hustles might be your key to long-term success. So grab your coffee, find a quiet spot, and get ready for conversation that could change your financial future. Let's dive in. Brandon, brother, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. And that was a very, very wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. First question for everybody, man, particularly veterans. Where did you grow up, and what inspired you to join the Army, my friend?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little bitty town called La Plata, Missouri, town about 1,400 people at the time, and I live 10 miles from that. So whenever I tell people I live 10 miles from nowhere, like I mean it. But as far as why I joined the military, really it boils down to I wanted to do something different. I didn't really see staying where I was. I wanted to see what else was out there in the world. Everybody kind of said, "Hey, you should get a tech job," like all that. This was, I graduated high school in 2005, so like that was still like everything's going to be tech, which I would say that's mostly come true. But I didn't want to go to college. I hated high school, and college to me was just like harder high school that you had to pay for. So I was like, it didn't interest me. So the Army kind of gave me the ability to kind of, appease everybody. So I say, hey, I'm going to get college paid for. So everybody that wanted me to go to college, like they're happy because I get free college. I get to do something different. It's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, dude, I relate to that so much because I grew up in southern Indiana in a town called Poseyville. So probably about the same number of people. It's not 10 miles from nowhere, but it's just farm towns, right? Like I know Missouri pretty well too. So, and I was just like you, man, like, I hated high school. I did what I had to do to play sports because that's what I was interested in. So I was a mediocre student, and I knew that college wasn't for me. However, I just used that to my advantage, and I would use, like, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'd go up there to visit, like college visits. But yeah, college wasn't for me at all. And so, there I was, 17 years old, joining the delayed entry program. And this is really cool for me because I have a lot of different veterans on this show, and they kind of run the gamut from when they joined. I've had people who have joined, way later in 2012, 13, 14, and, guys from, the Gulf War era, even Vietnam guys. You actually joined pretty close to when I did. I came in 03, and so you came in 05. So this is really cool to see somebody who's still active duty, that's an enlisted guy who went through the same struggles that I did. This is going to be awesome, man. So why did you pick the Army? Did you look at other branches?
Only a little bit. I mean, I really Really, in recruiting, we had a saying, first to contact, first to contract, and that's pretty much how it happened. But I did briefly entertain like Air Force or Navy. I actually didn't know that like really that the Marines were really like a thing or an option or what they did. So, but other than just my father-in-law, he's a Marine, or former Marine, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I was sitting on the couch on my lunch break in the summer, from working at the lumberyard, and recruiter calls me up. It says, "Hey, have you ever thought about the military?" And I was like, "Actually, yeah, I have." And then he's like, "Do you have time to come talk to me?" I was like, "Well, I get off work at 5." So he was like, "All right, I'll be here." So, and that's pretty much that's pretty
That's
much how
it.
it
Sealed your
started.
fate, man. So I see. I think from all your wall behind you, it looks like you're a signal guy, right?
I am. Yep, satellite communications by trade.
So was that your first choice when you came in, or talk to us about what you wanted to do initially going in and how you landed on Signal Corps and all that?
Yeah, it was pretty close. I mean, I didn't know that satellite communications was a thing, but I did know that I wanted to do something technology wise. Like I loved like tearing apart computers and different electronics and things like that. So and like I said, everybody was like, "Get a tech job, get a tech job. Like you got to, that's the only way you're ever going to make money." And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right, well, this sounds pretty cool. I mean, and actually, I do love the job. I mean, I think I've gotten to do some really fascinating things, especially on deployments and stuff like that. So I really do like the technical aspect of it. But unfortunately, over time, you get further and further away from that kind of stuff. So, but yeah. So I mean, it's pretty much yeah. I pretty much got exactly what I wanted.
Well, and it's interesting too because I'm just thinking back to the early 2000s and the technology and all of that. Like that was a perfect time for you to move into signal and satellite communications and all of that because I can think over the course of my 4 deployments, just looking at just the communications equipment we use from your typical emitters to then we went finally in my Afghanistan deployment, I forget what they called that, but the L3 Harris, the green radios that we ended up carrying on deployments and all of that. And just seeing the technological advances, I think you picked a hell of a field, man, because it set you up for where we're at 20 years later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a really wide, really wide field now. And especially with, without saying too much, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now that it's become even more important. And so, yeah, and it's kind of one of those too, where like I could get out and work in the same field and make pretty good money and do some cool stuff. But, that's actually, kind of not what I'm going to end up doing. So, doesn't
We're
feel
gonna
like a
get
waste though. But yeah, so
yeah.
but yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity. And one thing that's cool about like for me, like the SATCOM training that you get in the military, there's not a perfect parallel anywhere else that I know of.
That stands to reason, man, because I can remember, you probably remember, earlier deployments, probably like around my first or second deployments, so like '06 to '08 timeframe during the surge. We were running around. They got those little mushroom things on the back of the counter IED stuff, and I remember a lot of guys from those deployments getting out, going on to work for those civilian companies, developing that technology, and them saying something similar, like there's really not a lot of training elsewhere for this stuff. And so, it's definitely resonates with me what you're saying. But let's talk about when you get through basic training, obviously all of that, because here you are, you're almost 20 and you had some struggles, right? Like all those private struggles. Like I showed up to my first duty station somewhere between 2 weeks and a month after they came home from the invasion of Iraq at third ID. So life for me as a private was awful. The culture is, like from your introduction, it's drinking, it's energy drinks all the time. It's never taking advantage of a chow hall. It's go buy the flashiest truck, put the biggest, loudest stereo in it that you can with the biggest, shiniest wheels on it that you can. Talk to us about all of that stuff and kind of how you ended up becoming, the enlisted, financial guy now, because you somewhere along the lines realized, and I'm super guilty of this, man. I had 4 deployments and I had nothing to show for it. I was spending money when I'd come home because I didn't know. I already knew when I was going on the next deployment. As an infantry guy, for us, it's all about party, spend money. You don't know if you're coming home again, right? So I wasn't considering saving money, and I fell into all those traps. And then later, as a senior leader, I would have those privates who are going and buying cars at 19, 20% interest and all of that. So talk about the mistakes you made and all of that stuff and kind of why you think it's that way and what we can do to change that culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of things. One, um, like we come from a lot of different places, but most of those places were not exactly swimming in money. And if you don't have money growing up, you don't really learn how to manage it, or you don't get to see proper money management and things like that. And, I guess the metaphor I'll use for this, so when you get to basic training, if you're from, for me, I was, from a rural area, I've been hunting, all that kind of stuff. So you think you know how to shoot a rifle, you think you know what you're doing. But then, the military says, no, you don't. I don't care how you did it. Here's the right way to do it, and then you go down to the fundamental level, hey, this is how you hold your head. This is how you look at a sight. This is how you squeeze the trigger. This is how you breathe. This is how you think, all that. And so money management, a lot of times I feel, is the same way. It's we kind of, think we know what we're doing because I can spend money. Yeah, I know how to, I know how to do this. I paid my bills, right? Well, when you dig down and go, okay, well, what bills are you paying? Why are you paying that bill? Do you have to pay that bill? Let's zoom out. What's the real goal here? What are you working toward? And usually the answer is, I hadn't thought that far. I'm just living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, whatever. And there's no long-term aim or goal. And so, so I think that's a big part of why, we end up somewhere we may not want to be, or just, you never make any progress toward anything, or at least that was the case for me. I paid all my bills. I always, took care of it, but I created bills that I didn't need to have. I was using debt in an unhealthy way. And to your point, yeah, YOLO was definitely a thing. I mean, I joined, I didn't know that I was part of the surge, but that was when I joined. And so it was hey, life is cheap, guys. Let's have fun. So, I mean, and there's an aspect to that. I mean, not everybody that, went with us. I mean, even in a signal unit, we lost one of the guys and, the platoon, one of my sister platoons. So it was okay, yeah, no, this is, when we got there, it was hey, yeah, the DFAC is no more, they're rebuilding it because it got hit with rockets and all that kind of stuff. And then the one they rebuilt ended up getting, our laundry facility got taken out and people killed, so it's okay, yeah, no, there's a real aspect of that you only live once kind of mentality. So I think you bring all those together and it's yeah, saving for retirement, I don't know if I'm going to make it to 60. Come on.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the other aspect that nobody wants to talk about. It's almost the quiet part that nobody will say out loud. And it's you hit on it, but unless you come from money, you don't know how to manage money. So we all watched our parents struggle. I still watch my parents struggle. My goal with everything that I'm doing in business and everything else in life is to retire my father. He's 65 years old. Every time I talk to him, he's I'm going to have to work till I'm 70. Now it's 72. Now it's, and he works with his hands. He's a mechanic. He fixes commercial kitchen equipment. I think it's commendable. It's respectable. It's hard work, and he's done it for 40 plus years. But it's man, you could have, with proper education, you could have gone your own way and had your own company where you're now retired at 50 years old instead of, and it's just this. There's no financial education whatsoever for us growing up, period. I don't think anybody, unless you go to a private school or come from money where that becomes a focus. And I really think that that's part of a larger problem that we have in this country is just kind of fiscal education. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lack, and then also too, one thing that I've always, I won't get too far down this. You can go down a rabbit hole too, but it's if you're relying on the government to teach you how to manage your money, well, I hate to tell you, they don't know how to manage it either. Because look at national debt, look at all this kind of stuff. It's yeah, I don't know that that's where I want to take my advice from. So And I don't want to be dependent on other people. And so, a lot of the typical stuff is, like, hey, you build up, you build up a dependency toward, Social Security or whatever. And to your point, a lot of hardworking people, like, they don't save, because that just wasn't, it's not really their fault, because, the shift, there was a shift that happened, around Gen X timeframe, where, the commonality of a pension died. Pensions still exist. Of course, I'm, the military and all that kind of stuff, but mostly like government type jobs. But the private pension world kind of slowly dwindled, and then it shifted to, 401k and all that kind of stuff. But the underlying habits and, wisdom of that hadn't been built yet. There wasn't, grandpa didn't tell you needed to put, in the 80s and 90s, grandpa didn't say you need to put money away in your 401k, because grandpa didn't have a 401k. That wasn't a thing. Like you had a job in town, and you worked until you earned a pension, or you worked on the farm and family took care of you. And so, there was a huge shift over, from, 60s, 70s, 80s, away from that kind of stuff. But the underlying habits and knowledge on how to, properly set yourself up for retirement didn't really keep pace, in my opinion. So
I think you're right, man. I think you're absolutely right. And I can take it back to like when I first joined the Army, that late '02 is when I joined in July of '02, spent a year on the DEP program, graduated high school, in basic training a month after I graduated. I get to my first duty station and I get bad advice from a leader who probably got bad advice too. TSP is worthless. Don't invest in it. Don't ever put your money in it. 15 years later, when I get out, I'm thinking, man, it would have been nice to have a TSP, because I've learned all of these things that I could have done with my TSP. There's so many opportunities out there for TSP rollovers. You can use them to buy franchises now. Like, there's so many different things that you can do with them. And I'm like, man, I feel really, really jaded about that, because I got bad advice. And here I am, almost 40, still trying to truly turn it all around for myself. I have a way better understanding of it now, so please don't misunderstand me. But I'm sure you'll agree with this. It takes a long time to kind of straighten that out and really become disciplined with your finances. So I want to talk about, obviously it's not linear, and at some point throughout your career, you decided, like, I've got to make some changes. So you had a couple of deployments, Iraq and Afghanistan. I relate to that. I did 3 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. Again, spending money like crazy. And oh, by the way, never got any reenlistment bonuses. So all the money that I had access to was tax-free money overseas, and it's gone when I get back, because buying flashy trucks, and really I relate more to the beer and the energy drinks, because that's what I did. But
yeah.
That turns into weight gain, right? Like, and then you had an issue like I did with, I've always been a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", I weigh 220 pounds now. According to the Army, I should, at 6'3", only weigh 185 pounds. I couldn't tell you the last time I weighed 185 pounds. So I've always been on the fat boy program or whatever. How did all of this kind of culminate to end up pushing you towards the Enlisted Money Guy side and making these changes?
Yeah. So, so 2011 was a really, I didn't know it at the time. This is one of those, you only kind of realize these things looking back, but that was a huge transformative year for me. I was deployed most of that year in Afghanistan, and, started off, I mean, I kind of was set up, to be quite honest, on one thing, but like, so I kind of tell one mini story, and then I'll move into Afghanistan. But like, as far as weight control and stuff like that, so before I joined, I was in good shape. I played basketball, I ran track, I worked like a dog in the summers, mowing lawns, working at the lumberyard, doing construction, all that, and like, I was in good shape. I never had to worry about weight. Now, once I joined the Army, like, and this was complete, this didn't make any sense to me. Like, it was total opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I joined, I had 3 full meals every day, and you're kind of programmed when you get to eat at basic and all that, like, you eat everything you can, because like, you're just rushed, it's like the eat and slide, it's like, oh, so you just, you get programmed to just stuff your face full, which probably isn't a great way to do it. But
It's
anyway,
not at
so
all.
you add that with, also too, I had a steady paycheck, so I could buy stuff like, Mountain Dew, all that, like that's pretty much where, like the first few years, that's where most of my money went, was Mountain Dew, cigarettes, eating out with friends, like, the loud life kind of stuff. But also too, I was forced to be much more sedentary than I normally would be. Like I didn't move around, and I wasn't playing sports. Like, yeah, we did PT and stuff, but that's an hour a day. The rest of the time I was sitting in a classroom, or doing whatever, just, a lot of sitting around. So I was not used to that. So I very quickly gained a lot of weight. And similar to you, like the tape test and stuff back then was not favorable to tall people. So I'm about 6'2", and depending on the time frame in my life, weighed anywhere between 195 to almost 250. So it just depends. But yeah, so I was always at risk of busting tape. So I could always work it back off, but it took a long time to figure that stuff out. But 2011 was when that all came to a head. When we had one first sergeant that, basically he had set up the PT test before we go to Afghanistan. He said, "Hey, look, we're going to take the PT test mid-November, right before Thanksgiving. Y'all enjoy your holidays, whatever. And then we won't worry about taking a PT test until, after, a little while after we're in Afghanistan." Cool. Makes sense. Hey, like that sounds like a good thing. Go and enjoy your life, and we'll figure it out, because you're not going to have anything to do other than work out and sweat to death in Afghanistan anyway. Well, he ended up having a medical issue, didn't go downrange with us. And, we had another first sergeant, which we didn't have the same deal, but then we also ended up in a weird spot to where we fell under another battalion for a little while. And for whatever reason, that sergeant major, like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know if he saw somebody and was like, "Oh, y'all looking chunky." But like the second day we were in country, 100% height and weight for everybody. Lottie-dottie, everybody. And of course, it's like I've spent the last, however many months having all the beer and ice cream and whatever, because I'm not going to have it for a year. And so, yeah, so I busted tape and I lost my promotable status to staff sergeant. And that was like, I was as close to being devastated as you could be. Cause I was like, man, like, so yeah, so
I
that
have
was,
my
that
thoughts
was
and
really
opinions
tough.
on taking PT tests on deployments and doing height and weight, but I digress. I get it. Like, I also think that over the course of a 9 to a year long deployment, you could just, kind of suspend unfavorable action and just put them on a program and be like, look, you got to the end of this deployment to figure it out. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah. That's pretty much how we felt. I mean, we all felt betrayed. Like there was no goodwill born of that, but, one good thing that did happen is that was my moment that I said, you know what, I am sick and tired of having to deal with all this crap. If I'm going to stay in the Army, like I'm going to figure this out. I'm never going to get taped again. It was kind of what I said at the time. And so, I slowly figured it out, and I left that deployment, closer to that 195 pounds, versus, closer to 250 whenever I got there. So it ended up being a good thing for me, but, the way that I got there, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
So losing the
But
P status was the mindset shift event for you.
yeah, for the height and weight, yeah, it definitely was. I mean, that was, yeah, I was like, hey, like I'm not, like I was embarrassed. I mean, honestly, I was embarrassed because, it's like, man, luckily I ended up, being able to go back to the board and all that kind of stuff while in country, and got my promotable status back, and actually got promoted while I was deployed, which was kind of cool. Like the general actually was on a rotation, flying through, and he actually ended up, doing my promotion. Like it's pretty fun. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, so I mean, it worked out, but I mean, that was, big catalyst was like, all right, I'm just gonna, like, I'm gonna figure this out. So, got rid of soda, got rid of fried foods, and, just really, kind of, it's been net positive, I guess. So, but
So So when you make
Go ahead.
those changes, did you notice that, now you're not buying soda and you're not buying pizza all the time? You're probably not eating out as much, obviously, post deployment, because you can't really. I'm sure you can spend money on deployment. I never figured out how, because I was always,
Mhm.
as an infantry guy on the little cops, we didn't have access to shit, right? Like, so
Right.
we
Yeah.
weren't, we weren't spending money, but that probably helped a little bit with the finances. But what was the big catalyst that really kind of opened your eyes to your financial journey and then pushed you down the CHFC and the MQFP road and everything you're doing as the enlisted money guy?
Yeah. And so, so that same year, and this was toward the tail end of that deployment, we had, interestingly enough, whenever like my first deployment to Iraq, we got extended 3 months. And so we got that extra, $1,000 a month or whatever. And so like, I just was like, well, I don't know what to do with it. So I guess I'll pay off my Jeep. And so that's what I did. And so I actually came back from my first deployment debt free, which is, I was like, yeah, cool. But I didn't stay that way, because I didn't change the underlying habits. The habit was like, I want it. I have a credit card balance that's empty, so like, let's fill that sucker up. So so that's pretty much, I mean, I can remember like a week after, no, like a day after I got back from Iraq, I was in an empty apartment sleeping in a sleeping bag, but I had a brand new like glass, like smoked glass entertainment center with a brand new flat screen TV with a brand new PlayStation 3 and a brand
Yep.
new, Razer phone. Like I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
learn a thing. I didn't,
No.
I didn't learn anything. And so it wasn't long after that, actually, that we ran into the issue of, we didn't have any money to pay rent, because I was making these payments on things, and then we ended up having an issue where our electric bill was it was higher than what it normally was. I mean, probably just because when we when we first moved in, it was different time of year, and then now it's summer in Arizona, and like electric bills sky high. So like I can remember walking down there and asking the lady like, hey, do you like, do you take credit card for rent? Like, and she was like, we do. Like,
Oh,
I was like, okay.
no.
So
No.
that's, so that's what I did for that month. And then like, we kind of quickly realized like, hey, we don't have enough credit card to pay, rent like this for long. And so we ended up kind of putting a Band-Aid on that. But, kind of fast forward, we didn't learn anything, still using, debt. And we ended up, when we moved to Germany, we had two vehicles with two different payments. And, we were like, okay, well, we're going to go down to one vehicle whenever we go to Germany, because we can only ship one. And so logically, quote unquote, we just took what we would have been making payments for both of our vehicles and just said, hey, well, that's how much we can afford for, buying, something else. And so we bought a brand new Chevy Silverado E71, like all like, it was like my dream truck. Like, I was like, this is the truck.
And you were going to take this to Germany?
We did take it to Germany.
No, you did not take a full-size truck to
Oh,
Germany. I don't
oh,
think
we
this
did.
went well at all, did it?
It did not go well. Yeah, no, it was not a good decision in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I mean, there's a couple things. So right off the bat, I didn't realize that, if you have a vehicle that's financed, like, you can't necessarily just ship it overseas. Like, they have to allow you to do that. So I ended up having to refinance, like almost immediately refinance the truck in order to take it overseas. I also didn't realize how expensive insurance is in Germany, especially for a brand new American sized pickup truck. And I didn't factor in how expensive fuel would be. And so, like, very quickly, like, this truck that was, should have been, whatever, $600 payment, I think is what it was, $650 payment. Well, now this is $1,000 plus vehicle to own and operate while in Germany. And oh, by the way, we can't even use it half the time because it doesn't fit half the places in Germany. So yeah, no, it was a terrible idea. Like, it was not, I mean, it was kind of fun to to hold it pegged at, whatever, 98 or whatever it was, shut off on the Autobahn. Like, that was kind of fun. But other than that, like, it just sat for most of the time. So
Yo,
not a good decision.
As soon as you said Z71 and Silverado, I was like, size, right? Just for Europe and Germany. Germany is always a place I wanted to go. I never made it there, unfortunately, but you're not the first person I've heard of making a decision like this, but I didn't even consider the fuel cost. And so this is like 2011, 2012, kind of the height of fuel cost. And over there, they do it by liter, not by gallon, which is far less than a gallon of fuel, and it's way more expensive. So and then I didn't even know insurance was way higher too. I hadn't even considered. I thought that like it just kind of, I think we live in our own little bubble over here because the United States is so huge compared to, the rest of the world, if you will, that like we just think that everything operates the same way no matter where we're going to go. And you learned that lesson the hard way.
I did. Yeah, I did. And that's the thing too. There's also rumors too that they're like, oh, well, Germans will pay big money for, big American trucks. And I found out that is also not true because I tried to sell it while I was over there. It didn't, they're like, they wouldn't pay me hardly anything for it. I was like, well, I owe more than that. So like, yeah, I guess I'm just keeping this thing.
Well, and that's another factor, right? Like here, it's hard enough to get out from underneath of one. We just had to do it with my wife, so we got her out of a Tacoma she could no longer afford, put her in a Prius that she can actually use to drive DoorDash and Lyft and all that, and make extra money. It's actually paying for itself and then some now. So we go from a 17 Tacoma to a 24 Prius. Yeah, the payment's a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not happy with the interest, but it's just a better overall situation monetarily. And we broke that all down, 58 miles to a gallon versus 17 miles to a gallon, kind of stuff. Insurance dropped over $300 for 6 months or whatever, that kind of stuff, particularly on a brand new vehicle. But it was hard enough for us to get out of the loan we had on the Tacoma and get into the Prius. And we had to eat a little bit. And I don't like doing that because I know better now, right? But thinking about it in Europe, like you can't just get out from underneath of that, right? Like you're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, because really the only other people that really were interested in buying it was other service members who, they can't get a loan for what it costs because, well, I owed more than what, so, and they're not walking around with a bunch of cash to pay for it either. So yeah, we were stuck with it while we were there. And so, but that's the truck. Like I say that it was a terrible financial decision, but it ended up being a great eye opener. So I kind of joke that it's like my best and worst financial decision I ever made because that was what like kind of opened my eyes, I was sitting in a stinky, RSOI tent in Afghanistan. Like if anybody that's been in one of those knows, like it smells like foot sweat and shattered dreams in those. Like it's not good. Like it's not good. And so like the heat didn't work. Like, I'm sitting there shivering, like, bundled up and, but I had they'd just recently installed like the Wi-Fi in there. So I had Wi-Fi in a laptop. So I was, bored looking around. I mean, that's how you're really bored when you're like, oh, let's just look at some random bank statements. But I found that I was going to pay like $7,000 some odd dollars in interest on this loan, and I was like, that's crazy. Like I could have almost bought the truck that I had before that I loved. I loved that truck. I could have almost bought that in cash for that. I was like, that doesn't make sense. And so then like I started Googling and I found a blog called Get Rich Slowly. And I read a ton of articles on that. And you ended up, kind of stumbling into Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. And so I was like, oh, that's what we're going to do. We're getting rid of debt. That's our problem. And so when I got home, I told my wife, and I'll never forget this either. I told her, hey, look, we're going to go debt free. And she was like, how will we ever buy anything nice? And and I mean, and it was a logical, reasonable question. So, but now, fast forward, like after doing all that, now we buy vehicles in cash. Like we just bought, I wrote a personal check for her Jeep, $25,000, and I just wrote a check at the dealership, like, and so, we're not that far removed from that. I mean, of course, we're a few years, past it, but yeah, I remember the first time we bought a major, like a nice vehicle in cash. I mean, I swiped a debit card at the CarMax and typed in my PIN and, bought a I don't know, $20,000 minivan. It was like, if you're going to buy a minivan, that's the only way to make it any cooler. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
that's,
and I can imagine
yeah.
that that's a personal goal of mine too, is to just walk with a bag of cash or write a check or swipe a debit card for a purchase large like that. That obviously that has to be a great feeling. And so this is the perfect segue into kind of what you're about to go through in the transition. So you're at, almost 20 years, and talking to you before we started recording here, it sounds like you've got a pretty good idea of, kind of the future for you and the transition. However, I think that it's probably not going to go and this is not to put you down, but just from experience, man, it's probably not going to go as smooth as you think it's going to go. And there's several different things over the course of this podcast, as I've already talked to you about, that I've identified that really contribute to a terrible transition, and things that what do they call it now? SFL TAP in the Army? You would know because you're
Yeah, I
about
think
to go through it.
it's just TAP now.
Just
yeah,
TAP. So it was ACAP when I got out, and it changed to SFL TAP. Now it's just TAP or whatever. Anyway, so the transition assistance program is not going to tell you these things. They're not going to prepare you for the loss of identity that you're about to go through, which is the number one thing. And it's very closely tied to loss of purpose. Those are the two biggest things that veterans deal with across the board, hands down. Then it goes into community and kind of network building. But the number 4 or 5, I can't really remember. It's up there high on the list, is financial readiness. And it's kind of shocking to me how many people over the course of, I don't care how long they've been in, 5 years, 25 years, don't have a good handle on finances. And I get it, because I'm almost 40 and I still, don't have the most solid grasp on finances. I'm way better than I've ever been. And it's, I'm on that uphill climb, if you will, right? Like I'm going through the process. I'm probably doing it a lot differently than you did, particularly because I'm running my own business that I'm funding with myself. So I've structured my finances in a way where I can do that. And, I'm probably making some decisions that you wouldn't agree with, living on credit card debt for the business to keep it going, and then paying that off, as I can, just kind of playing with limits and balances and whatnot until I have the revenue, to cover down or whatever. But I want to talk to you about kind of how you're viewing your transition and all of these steps financially that you've taken to this point to kind of really help prepare you for avoiding one of the things that I see happen a lot in the transition. It's that really contributes to, I would say, kind of the depression in the transition hole. And that's veterans getting out thinking, I have to take this first corporate job because it pays either more or the same that I make now. And I think that's just a crucial mistake that everybody makes, is they pigeonhole themselves into this box that they're going to be completely miserable in, and it spirals everything else out of control. So I want to try and paint the picture of how you that conversation you had with your wife to, I want to be debt free after reading all these articles. This is how we're going to live our life, to how that's prepared you to really, I think, set you up for a much better transition, in that you're not going to have to pigeonhole yourself, because you already said you could get a lucrative job in the space that you're currently operating in the Army, right? And know that you're going to be okay. But that's not what you want to do, right? You already know what you want to do. You know what your purpose is. And so, this is a perfect kind of way to paint this picture for anybody who might be in the same situation that you are. So I'm just going to give you the floor, man. Wherever you think that needs to go, talk about freeing yourself financially and creating this Enlisted Money Guy stuff, to how that prepares you in the transition and your philosophy over the transition as well.
Yeah. So I think, to your point, I think you're right. I mean, I think having something to exit to or retire to is so incredibly critical. And I think if you aren't deliberate about that, and you don't start building toward whatever that is, you're setting yourself up for potential heartache. I'm blessed, I guess, in the sense that, like, I've always kind of pushed against, like, the Army, like, hey, like, this is not 100% of me. Like, I've always kind of had that duality of service where, you know, hey, Sergeant Lovinger, or Specialist Lovinger or whatever, Sergeant Lovinger is this person over here. Brandon is a different person, and so I've always kind of had that. So I don't, I think that was just something that kind of I just maybe out of dumb luck, just the unit I was in whenever my first unit, that's the way it was. It was like, hey, at work, we're serious. We're getting ready for deployment, all that kind of stuff. But when we're out of work, it's first name basis. We're all partying together. Like it's, we're just, I mean, we were a legit family outside of work.
Well, and
Not the,
this is ultra important right here, because what you're talking about is separating your military identity from your identity as Brandon Lovinger, the person, without the military period. And that's the biggest mistake, like I said, that people make, is they don't ever separate that. I can look at a room full of 20 military guys or gals, and I can ask them, who is so and so without that uniform on, and you'll get a bunch of blank stares because they don't know. Because like me at 17 years old joining the Army, from 17 to 30, all I know is how to be an Army infantryman. I never figured out who Adam Peters is without that uniform, because a lot of reasons, right, that we don't need to go into here. If you want to go into those, go to my YouTube channel, watch for the video series that's coming out later this year about all of these issues. I dive deep into them and why they are this way. But you're nailing it, man. And I think you're doing a great job of having that kind of, like you said, that duality of service. You have to serve yourself as well. And that's where it starts, man. So you've already done the hard work because you know who you are without the uniform. And that's usually where people get tripped up from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, but that's one thing too. And I don't want to like act like I just, this was an easy process or a short process, and that's the thing I think so important. And one thing that I tell people, like you have to start preparing to leave the day you enter, because none of us gets to stay forever, even if you want to stay forever. And most people may not have, like that may not 100% be their choice. There's a lot of people that are medically discharged, medically retired. There's a lot of things that happen that are out of your control. But the thing you can control is you can start saving up, for, and get your finances straight from day one. And, and I think that, that comes back to kind of what I, talked about earlier, is like the fundamentals, like, hey, look, everything's fine, but it's like, well, but what happens if what you have now is no longer there? What happens when you leave? Not if you leave, like, cause you are going to leave, like, and statistically speaking, roughly 60% of people that join don't stay past their first term. So like, what's your plan? Very few people are going to stay for a pension. I'm incredibly blessed that I'm going to, I've almost made it. I've got my retirement orders in hand and all that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot of stress with that too. Like, always, I think that just, we're built to not trust the military. It's like, how's this going to get screwed up? Like, kind of to your point, like, I don't expect it to go well, because like, everything's been going pretty well. And I'm like, every time that it's like, every time that things start going well, I'm like, that's when something really bad happens. So like, I just have that overwhelming like sense of like dread of like, how am I, like, how's the big green weenie going to come from left field and strike one last time? Like, that's really like what I'm looking at. But, but to the point of like the financial piece and like kind of why I got, into all this in the first place is, I didn't want to stay past my first enlistment. I really didn't. But when I sat down with my wife and looked at, our finances and all that, it's like, we kind of need to stay, because we don't have, like, I have an idea, but an idea without the finances to back it up is not a plan. Like a plan, you have to have, the money to actually, do the thing. Like you have to be able to actually figure out how to make that happen. And so, long story short, I've ended up kind of each time, like, not quite being ready yet. And then, I was over the hump, and it's like, well, might as well stay. I'm already, over 10. And, at the time, TARA, the temporary early retirement, where you could retire at 15, was still a potential option. Of course, right after I re-enlist, it's no longer an option. But, which, that's just
Whatever,
the way it is.
right? Yeah, that's how it goes.
And so, so long story short, I step sold myself into staying, for 20, which, hey, don't cry for me. I'm going to have that, that inflation adjusted pension for life, the medical benefits for life. It's going to work out. But the cost of that, and I wrote an article about this, talking about, I forget exactly what I titled it, but basically like, the cost of, making it to 20 that nobody talks about, or the sacrifice, that nobody, talks about. And really it is that loss of self, or, the not being able to really truly be who you are, because the majority of your life is still dictated by, whatever branch of service, whatever, because it's always the military over everything else, like your life, your family, none of that. Like, I mean, yeah, they have the platitudes of like, we recruit individuals and retain families, or whatever, whatever the new saying is. But it's like, no, like it really, the old saying of, if they wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one, pretty much that's probably more accurate than, I think there is a little bit of a shift, happening, in that regard, but I think overall that still reigns true. And so, so I guess I say all that to say, you need to start working from day one to a point to where the military needs you more than you need the military. And once you get there, then that's a really powerful place to be. And I'll actually say, I think my career in the military has improved significantly because of that mindset shift of like, I don't need this anymore. And so, so I didn't care about, all the stuff that I was doing. And so I was really able to lean into, what kind of leader do I want to be? What do I want to teach these, these young people, and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that ended up being, get your finances straight. Don't, I could see, and not everybody's going to listen, not everybody's going to listen. But for the ones that do, it can make a huge impact. I can remember sitting down and just having asking a simple question. Hey, why, at the time, the TSP was defaulted to 3% into the traditional TSP. And I just, when I'd see an LES come across my desk for a leave pack, I'd be like, hey, what made you choose to put 3% into the traditional TSP? And usually the answer is like, I am like, I don't even know what the TSP is. And so it's like, okay, well, hey, sit down, let's have a conversation, and I can remember one very specifically, like he came in and he was taking notes, like he was looking, I pulled up the compound interest calculator online and showed him like, hey, look, if you put, I think we worked out, it was $138 a month is what he needed to put in, until he was 60 to be, millionaire, whatever. And so like just showing him that, he was like, oh, wow. Like, cool. And I was like, now let me show you something, a little different. Let me show you how much I have to put in, because I didn't start when you did, and that was like, whatever, 600 or whatever it was, a month. Like, that's how much I have to put in to play catch up. And I've only been in, this short amount of time, longer than you have. So it was eye-opening stuff. And so the next one that I saw, he was putting 12% in. I was like, yeah, like just made a millionaire. But, but that's going to have a huge impact, because that's going to give him the confidence to go, you know what, I've got this, I'm going to be fine. Like, and so I want to use like what I'm doing on the enlisted money side, to empower people to serve on their own terms, and, have the personal finance base to be able to leave when they're ready, or stay and just be, not have to worry about, like, regardless of whether you stay or you leave, your life is going to be, you're going to be a better leader within your own family. You're going to be a better leader within the military. You're going to be a better person, because you're not as worried about all the money stuff. So to me, it's a win-win.
And I couldn't agree with you more, man. I hadn't really considered how impactful ironing out your finances could be in the sense of making your career better, but also obviously making you a better leader, because now you can share that knowledge with people who are starving for this knowledge. Because you're right. How many times does an LES come across your desk and you're just sitting there looking, and what's a TSP? I don't even know, Sergeant. Like, what's a TSP? I didn't know I was putting money into that. And then you said, you got this guy taking notes, and he's like, $138 to make me a millionaire? Like, duh, that's a no-brainer. I can miss $138 right now. And then giving them the comparison, right, to drive that home even more, like fuck, I'd have to put in like $1,600 a month right now to play catch up. You know what I mean? And like that discrepancy, to be able to show that to people, that's going to be so impactful, because now when they make, E6, E7, and they're sitting there doing the same thing for their soldiers, they're going to remember that conversation they had with you, and it just snowballs and perpetuates itself. So I'm so glad that you kind of touched on that, because I think finances is, I think it's the single biggest kind of stress point. Like it's a jumping off point for literally everything that ails us in our lives. If your money's not right, from the sense of like just knowing what you have, what's going out, what's coming in, and can I cover all of these things, and having like a really good control over your money, it eliminates, even with what I'm doing, like the business makes no money. I'm out of pocket every month for the business or whatever, but I still have money and I don't have stress, because I know exactly, right, like what I can spend, when I can spend it, how I can spend it. And, I again have to operate in that little box, but it's a box I've created for myself that I have complete control over, and I can continue to do indefinitely. You know what I mean? And like, I didn't realize like how much better my life would be because of that, even though I might have less than, and I can't go do some of the things that I want to do or make the purchases that I want to make. It's okay, because I'm never going to run out of money at the pace that I'm at right now, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And then it just improves every aspect of my life. And so I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like, there's a lot of people like, it's funny too. Like I used to think like senior NCOs and officers and all that are, basically like, oh, you need to be better with money and all that, whenever, like I'm, pointing the finger at me. Most of them are not, they're not doing like anything substantially better than a majority of everybody else. They just get paid more. So $1,000 mistake for an E7, E8, E9, or an officer, like that doesn't hurt as much as $1,000 mistake for E5 and below. And so it's not necessarily that they're that much better with money. Like I think on the whole, most of them have figured it out over time, like, hey, you can't spend more than what you make every month and it work out okay. Like that's something that people kind of eventually figure out. Like I eventually figured that out. Like, hey, if I get paid, $5,000 a month, I can't sustainably spend $6,000 a month and it not become a problem. It will eventually become a problem. But, I think, the other thing too is like, you no matter where you're at, and I struggled with this too, is like, oh gosh, like if I was so stupid, like how did I not know how to do all these, it's like, hey, you don't know what you don't know. And the biggest thing is just to measure. Like I tell people, measure where you're at right now. Doesn't matter what it looks like. If you just measure where you're at right now, then you can just slowly work toward and like check it again in 6 months, in a year. And as long as you're improving, that's all you can ask for. Like you're on your own path. And, to your point in your business or whatever it is, like we all start somewhere. And then, but having that data can help you make some really impactful decisions. I mean, point in case, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were looking at, hey, like, does this make sense to refinance, my truck? And it's like, well, maybe, so they had a pretty high interest rate, all that. But whenever I looked at the numbers, kind of, with, how amortization works and all that, where it front loads the interest payments, is like, actually, you would actually end up paying more, even with with an interest rate, that's several percent lower than what you have now, because you would, basically recast that loan. Even if you did that at a smaller interest rate, you're actually going to end up paying several, like almost $20,000 more over the course of the lifetime of that vehicle than what you would if you just kept the payment you have right now, which doesn't make logical sense, when you're just thinking about it. It's like, well, of course refinancing will bring that payment down and that's better. But when you zoom out, it's like, no, actually, no, that wouldn't be a good decision, because you're going to end up paying so much more over the course of, the loan. So,
it's like when you look at refinancing your house right now, it's like, no, I don't want to refinance whatsoever, because I know me and I know I'm going to get that lower payment, and that's the payment I'm going to make. And I'm going to start 30-year loan all over again when I've already front loaded 2 years of that interest rate. Like I'm not interested in that. I'll just keep making my payment. You know what I mean? Or if the smart play for me would be to refinance the house and continue to make my mortgage payment the way that it is now so that I pay that interest down, by like 10 years or something like that, but I know I'm not disciplined enough to do that. So I'm just going to stick with what I've got. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's what
Yeah.
works for me right now. And that's how I've structured my finances. Dude, I love all this stuff. So what is at the heart of Enlisted Money? Like what are you doing with this? What are your plans for this when you're out? I know this is going to be your thing. So what do you plan on doing with it? Where do you see it going?
Yeah. So, so a couple things. One, whenever I say whenever I started my own business, I actually have a whole separate business aside from this, which, I mean, we can talk about more if you want, but Enlisted Money itself, I really like the heart of what I'm trying to do is just create all the content that I wish I would have consumed and applied when I was 18 years old. So I'm, I guess that you could say it's, like partly selfish, but really I'm trying to help the PFC Lovinger of today not have to struggle the way that I did. Like like, hey, you can skip all these steps. Like I'm a big believer that experience is cheap if you're smart enough to get it secondhand. So I'm trying to provide that experience secondhand for other people to shortcut that journey. And I'm creating, other different things everybody that signs up for my newsletter, they get, basically you get access to like my little get started checklist that I made. I have what I'll probably change the name at some point, but maybe not. I'm calling it the mother of all financial spreadsheets. That's basically just all the trackers and stuff that I use all smushed into one thing. But then eventually, like this summer, I actually wrote the first draft to my book. And so I'm eventually, that's one of my goals this year is to really put a dent into getting that edited and all that. But yeah, eventually that's kind of where I'm headed with that, is to have something there. Now, I don't know, I actually don't know exactly what I'll build, from there, but that's really like the image in my mind that I'm trying to bring into life and make real is instead of handing out somebody else's book, I can have my own book and say, here, I made this for you. I hope you like it. And
Dude.
So that's really what I'm trying to do. And just hand that to a young service member and say, hey, just follow this and you won't have to worry about money.
Dude, that's super powerful because it's the same way that I'm building TSV with this platform. It's to help Staff Sergeant Peters from 10 years ago getting out of the Army, right? Because in 10 years, it hasn't changed. It's getting worse. The numbers are going up of our battle buddies that are killing themselves. And a lot of people want to say, oh, well, that's related to combat. It's 95% of veteran suicides have nothing to do with combat at all whatsoever. It blows my mind, but I'm creating the content to help Staff Sergeant Peters, my past self, is super powerful. And I love what you're doing because I was actually challenged at the end of, 2 weeks ago, right? So this is January 2nd, 2025. So, we're just into 2025. So last year I was challenged to, get a transition book with my name on it on the shelves. Like people want that from me and they want my story. And so I'm going through that process as well. And that's how I'm approaching it. Exactly like you are. Like, I want to be able to take this thing and hand it to that person that's getting out and say, I wrote this for you. I made the mistakes. If you read this, you'll be able to largely avoid those mistakes. Do I know that everybody's going to take that, throw it on their couch and be like, this guy's full of shit? Yeah, I do know that that's going to happen, but at least I've done something to, you'll be able to go back to that book when you finally figure it out and be like, yeah, I should have read this because I would have avoided all of those things. It's possible to avoid all of these mistakes. You just have to be willing to, take the advice from people like us who've been there, right? Like we've done that. And so I think that's exciting, man. Tell me about the Next Gen Award and what that means to you. That's pretty cool, man, to win an award, in finance stuff. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I was, I was super, excited to be selected and I think that just speaks to, I think when you just do things from, an authentic place from yourself, like some people tend to notice. And so, yeah, I was super excited that I got selected for that. And it was a really amazing experience getting to go and accept the award. That was a really fun event. And, it's really encouraging. It's really validating, just to get recognized by, the college that that's where I got the scholarship, from, from the Center for Military and Veterans Affairs from the American College of Financial Services. I know it's a mouthful, but that's how I got my education, getting into all this stuff. Cause that was one thing that was important to me when I started kind of down this journey, was like, if I'm telling people about personal finance, I want to make sure that they know and that I know, like I've got the education. It's not just, hey, yep, I became debt free and now I'm an expert, that kind of thing. So I think that combination between, hey, I did this thing and I'm still doing the thing. Like I'm still, I haven't made it, so to speak, but we're every year our net worth grows and we're getting better and better and working toward financial independence. So I'm still on that journey, but you add that with the education. So the lived experience plus the education. And then also too, in my work as a paraplanner, I actually get to see like the real world numbers of like actual people that are millionaires and are, retiring, and, get to see like the issues and stuff that they're dealing with. So then I can apply that to my own stuff. And then I'm a pretty much an open book. My wife isn't comfortable with me sharing numbers and stuff like that. So I don't share specific numbers, but that really doesn't, to me, that doesn't matter anyway, because my journey is not exactly like anybody else's, but the concepts and, the tactics and techniques and all that kind of stuff is all the same. And so I think, being able to just share that and have, one, like like what this looks like, when you get there, and then be able to apply that and go, hey, look, I know where maybe you are, like I know where I was, I know what I'm doing, and I know, like this needs to happen because of all this. So I think that's something that makes, what I'm doing pretty helpful. But then just, I guess back to the point of like, just being recognized for the work I'm doing is, it's just, I don't, it's just awesome. Yeah. I just can't, I'm working on trying to accept compliments and things like that, and working on promoting what I'm doing, but that's not something that comes very naturally to me.
No, and it won't, man. It just gets worse because I'm the same way. I totally understand it's hard to accept awards for that stuff, because I think it comes from a place of just genuinely wanting to help others, being that servant leader, right? Like I'm doing this because I was tired, at the height of pretty much before my ayahuasca journey, and falling, all the way to rock bottom in the transition hole. I was getting probably, I don't know, no exaggeration, 15 or 20 notifications a month of, people that I had served with taking their lives. And I was in a bad place myself. I mean, it's not a secret here. Anybody who's listened to this show knows, I was 311 pounds. I was 100 pounds overweight. I was, basically diabetic, just really just eating myself and just being lazy and just dying. And then, contemplation of suicide all the time, right? Like probably never had the balls to actually do it, but, I'd be on a ride on the Harley and like, this all ends if I just take it into a tree right now at 120 or whatever, but everybody talked about wanting to do something about the 22 a day, right? Or to try and make an impact. And it's like, well, I'm just tired of people saying that we need to do something about it. And in those text messages back and forth, it's like, we got to stop this shit. How do we stop this shit? And then days go by and you get another notification. Nobody did anything. And so, I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing, but I just wanted to get out there, and now I'm seeing all the results of that, and that's all coming back to me tenfold, and being recognized and being praised for the work that you're doing. It's very unnatural because I didn't start this for that. I didn't start it for myself. I started it to just be proactive and try and do something about our battle buddies killing themselves, because these are some of the finest men and women on the planet, and we're offing ourselves, and that's not good for anybody. You know what I mean? And so I definitely relate to that, man. I only have two more questions for you, and then we'll get you out of here. Um, how are you different from other financial advisors? This has been a super pleasant conversation. I love everything that we've talked about, and I've had a lot of conversations with financial advisors who, I don't know, you can just kind of tell that they just want your business. They want to take, a percentage of money that you're going to invest with them, or whatever. And so what really does make you different? First of all, I think the one thing that sticks out to me the most is you've used your own product essentially. So, that really speaks volumes. I feel like there's a lot of financial advisors out there that probably come from money, and so they can't relate to, the overconsumption and the overspending on credit card debt and buying, too many energy drinks and all of that shit. So I feel like that's got to be some of it, but what does make you different?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touch on it, but I mean, so for one, like I don't have anything to sell people. I mean, I don't have anything to sell people, and I probably, not saying I'll never have like a service to offer or anything like that. Eventually, I'll have a book and things like that. But you know, I think I guess just from a overarching difference is I'm coming from a place of abundance. I don't need this to work for me. I don't need this to make money. And so like this is just something that like I want to do. Like I do this because it's a passion of mine, not because I need it to pay the bills. And unfortunately, what is not said or not understood is like not all financial advisors actually have their own personal finances together. And so, when you're being, told, hey, this, do this, give me your money, buy this product, whatever, a lot of times that's coming from a place of scarcity because they need the income to make their life work, which I don't fault anybody for that. Hey, we all have to put food on the table. Got it. Understood. But that's the overarching system problem of that is that puts them in a position to where their interests are not necessarily 100% aligned with your own best interests. Now, the over like the SEC, FINRA, all that, they try and regulate that into the process and try and eliminate or at least make them disclose conflicts of interest. But at the end of the day, like it's just anytime money changes hands, there is a potential for a mismatch of interest. So but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people or anything like that. There's good people that get stuck in bad systems all the time. But then the other part of that too is I just come from, I guess I was lucky in that I ran across some really great financial advisors, that are doing this from, a similar place where they're just trying to do, they're trying to create something that wasn't there for them, trying to create, financial, like fee only, advice only, like those kinds of financial planning firms. And so, I've hung out a lot with, those kind of folks. And that's a lot of where the MQFP designation comes from. Like those people, so, that's really was born from advisors that are part of the Military Financial Advisors Association. Some of the most helpful and giving and caring people I've ever met. They have been very gracious with their time and helped me out. And actually, even one of them actually, whenever I was first starting this, I didn't ask for this at all, but they actually bought a blogging course for me and said, hey, if you'll go through it, I'll pay for it. And I mean, I was like, I was blown away because it was like of course I looked it up because I'm like, I don't want to accept, but I'm, like, I also understand too, like when you don't accept a gift, then you're actually robbing them of the opportunity to do something for you. So I was like, okay, all right, I will accept, but I'm going to make sure I get something out of this. And so, and actually we become really good friends, over the last couple of years, but, just to give you an idea of like the kind of people that are, that are there. So I think that's the biggest thing is just, I'm doing this because I want to. I don't have to do this. My paraplanning and content writing business that I run separately is, it's that's the actual money maker. Like I lose money on enlisted money actually. So it's not ironically enough, this isn't necessarily a good financial decision, but that's not why I got into this. I got into this project because I wanted to help people. And I wanted to help somebody like me. And so I think so far, I mean, it's been a really fun project. I think a lot of people resonate with it. And just the fact that enlistedmoney.com was open, like that told me like I need to make something here. So that's I think that's probably the biggest thing. So
I love it, dude. Well, that was my final question. I think you just answered it. Where can everybody find you, reach out, learn how to manage their finances from you with all of your content? I know you mentioned Enlisted Money is free. So please, obviously the website, I'm sure you have social media links. I know sometimes people will get out of their own way and they will send a DM or whatever to book a meeting with you to just have a conversation because maybe, that's what they need. I assume you probably do that, but just tell everybody how they can reach out to you and get in contact with you, man. And we'll link all of that to the show notes as we post this when it goes live.
Yeah, I mean, really the best place, is just enlistedmoney.com. And then, more importantly, I ask people to sign up for my newsletter just because that's where, if you want to know like any new stuff that I'm doing, any things like that, like I gave away, I'm giving away books, to my newsletter, subscribers, like all that kind of stuff. Like I love the conversations that I'm having with people that reply to my email. So that's maybe a little selfish, because I love those conversations more than anything, but that's the best place to get in contact with me. But yeah, I'm on social media too, but I'm not as excited about social media.
I feel it, man. Dude, thank you so much for being here and imparting so much wisdom on us. I look forward to bringing you back probably, let's just say, I don't know, about a year after you retire. And I want to dive into your transition and kind of some of the areas that you weren't prepared for, because I think that'd be ultra valuable, particularly with what we talked about in your transition today. For those of you listening to this episode, please help us achieve our goal of getting this in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. So that means we have a little less than 5 months and 7 days to go. Please help us get this in front of 1 million veterans. I know this can change everybody's transition for the better. Rate, review, subscribe, download, share it with everybody. There's 19 million veterans in the United States. So if you all took 2 seconds to do it, we'd blow that out of the water in 5 minutes. So until next week, we'll see you later. Take care, everybody. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.